Good evening and welcome to the Westborough Advisory Finance Committee meeting of June 17th, 2024 at Memorial Hall and Town Hall. This is our 31st meeting of fiscal 2024 and our last scheduled meeting of fiscal 2024. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, this meeting will be conducted in person and via remote means in accordance with applicable law. This means that members of the public body, as well as members of the public, may access this meeting in person or via virtual means. In-person attendance will be here as posted, and it is possible that all members of the public body may attend remotely with in-person attendance consisting of members of the public. This meeting may be accessed via the Zoom link posted in the agenda. When required by law or allowed by the chair, persons wishing to provide public comment or otherwise participate in the meeting may do so by in-person attendance or by accessing the meeting remotely as noted. Additionally, this meeting will be hopefully broadcast live in real time via Verizon Channel 28 and Charter Channel 192 or via Westborough TV's online platforms at westboroughTV.org and youtube.com/WestboroughTV. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed by Westborough TV, and we thank them. Is anybody here for public comment? No. Okay. So we can move on to our first agenda item, which are, we have 3 intra-department requests and 2 inter-department requests. So we'll start with the intra ones. And the first one is Health Department from salary and wage to expense. So why don't you make the motion and then we can ask questions and discuss.
McMahon, I move to approve the transfer $5,000 from Board of Health wages to Board of Health expense.
Bradley, second.
Okay. And you said the amount. Is there any questions or explanation? Christie's tied up at the moment.
Oh, sorry, Jonathan. I was trying to get the screens on.
John Steinberg, Chief Assessor, Internal Finance Director. This is a result of additional TB outbreaks in monitoring.
TB as in tuberculosis?
Yes.
Okay. And we do have Jen Sullivan here as well, right?
Yes, hello.
Hi, Jen. Any questions from the committee? Okay, let's go to a vote, and we have no members remote, so all we have to do say is all in favor? Any opposed? Any abstained? Okay, and there are 7 of us, so passes 7-0-0. With
Thank
7
you.
present. Thank you for coming. Okay. Our next one is from the Finance Department, from salary and wage to expense. Let's make a motion similar.
McMahon, I move to transfer $5,000 from finance salary and wages to finance expense.
Okay. John, you want to speak to this?
Sure. This is just an additional result of the staffing over additional, excuse me. Let me start again. This is a result of additional outsourcing of some services with accounting and internal training. We had some overlap trying to get them to work with every town accountant with all the data learned.
Okay. Anybody with questions for John?
Do we expect that during budgeting that we'll be moving back into salaries, or is this sort of a permanent shift?
Yeah, no, this was really just because of the period of time that we went sort of without accounting. I don't know if you know this, but I might be an assessor and know a bit about finance, but I'm not an accountant. So we had some people coming in and doing some contract accounting services. Additionally, while we were without a treasurer collector, we had some coming in and doing some treasury services. And so coming into the end of the fiscal year, we sort of made that a little more intensive as we were coming up. Now that we've hired a town accountant, Allison Lawrence, who's excellent. We're very happy to have her along. We'll be transitioning solely to her and doing eliminating the contracted services.
Thank you.
And we saved on the salary column
Yes.
because we didn't have employees.
Yes,
in
we
those
have salary
positions.
line item to transfer because we weren't paying employees.
John, are all your positions filled now?
No, we actually, during the course of this, we lost our assistant treasurer collector, as well as we had a retirement of our administrative clerk there. So we have 2 positions open in that office. And then, of course, we have 1 person playing 2 roles as well, so.
Okay, so we need to do a public service announcement to get.
Yeah.
That's
There
right.
was
If you-
your
All the
chance to plug
finance-
that
If
you're
you
hiring.
know anyone
Watching
looking
our show, we need to-
work their way up in the office of the treasurer collector and
Yeah.
municipal finance, it's a great opportunity.
All right, very good. Any further? Okay, all in favor? No one opposed, 700. One passes. Very good, thank you, John. So, next, our last visit from Maureen. Library from salary and wage to expense.
McMahon, I move to transfer $7,500 from library salary and wages to library expense.
Bradley, second.
Thank you. Okay. Maureen, why don't you,
Good evening, Maureen Amiot, 6 Arch Street, Library Director.
And I'm Lynn Sukup, 8 Harrison Ave. I'm the Assistant Library Director.
welcome.
And we're asking for the transfer due to a pump failure last November, which cost us an unanticipated $7,450.
And at the time, there was enough money to get it done, but it ended up bleeding out all the money, if I
Absolutely.
recall.
Correct.
So we didn't have to do an emergency transfer, but at the end of the year,
Yes, we
the
knew this
water's
was
all down in
coming.
the well. Okay, any questions on this from? No? Okay, all in favor? Anybody opposed? No, 700 passes.
Thank
And Thank
you.
you very much.
Thank you, Maureen.
Thank you, Maureen. Speaking of vacancies in departments, impending vacancies in departments, we wish you the best. Next up, we have 2 inter or between department transfers. The first one going to the fire department expenses from police salary and wages. So let's make a motion, and then Pat Purcell has joined us remotely, and he can comment on it.
McMahon, I move to transfer $45,000 from police salary and wages to fire department expense.
And for the record, the police chief did sign the form too.
It's not a plundering.
Just letting you know, this isn't a.
Chief Purcell is
grab
not.
thing. So, Pat, thanks for joining us.
We need a second.
Oh,
Bradley, second.
Thank
Bradley,
you.
second. Okay,
Sorry.
now you can tell us about this.
I got an echo. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
fine.
You're not echoing to us.
Okay. Actually, it's gone now. Thank you.
Oh, good.
So I'd like to say thank you to the police chief for helping me out with the interdepartmental transfer. It's a request for to move $45,000 into our expense line. If you remember last year, I came before you. It's a similar story that I had as for last year. One was 1/3 of that request is to support ambulance billing. We've again this year exceeded our collections amount. We're on pace for about 2.4 to 2.5 million, which is up another $300,000 to $400,000. And there is a commission that goes along with that through the ambulance billing company. We're right now in the hole about 15,000 plus on that. The second reason why we're requesting the transfer is our fleet budget to maintain our vehicles. We actually ran out of money in this line in October. Very difficult time replacing vehicles. Hopefully we'll have the new engine that we ordered in 2021 in the fire station in the middle of July. It is done being built and it's been moved up to Connecticut at the dealer. I saw it today, but it still has some things that need to be done to it. And the last thing is the medical supplies line. is upside down by about twice what we budget, and that is merely due to cost escalation and increasing call volume with the amount of supplies that we're using. That's kind of where I'm at.
Any questions for the chief?
Chief Purcell, can I clarify, so for the fleet maintenance, the increased cost is just because we're repairing the vehicles we're unable to replace? Is that what, I mean?
It's not just that reason, so there's also a cost escalation there as well in parts. We do the majority of our work in-house. We have a mechanic that is a firefighter EMT that works for us that does the majority of our maintenance, so he cuts down a lot on those labor costs. But yes, call volume, vehicles responding to calls. Our newest ambulance just hit 100,000 miles up, I believe, and that's only a year and a half old, 2 years old. But the ambulance is pretty much, two of them anyways, run pretty much around the clock, and those have been expensive to maintain.
Anyone else? I was going to ask you about the new fire truck, because I heard rumor that it was coming, but it's not yet. I got to wait another month.
Yeah, it was supposed to be here next week, but I did a final inspection on it today, and no go. Another month.
Okay. Very good. And what number is that going to be called? Because I think 2 disappears, right? 2's the old.
What engine is it? Engine
Yeah.
2. It's replacing our current engine 2, which is a 1996, and it's just so we'll get rid of one engine 2 and replace it with another engine 2.
28 years, wow.
Yeah.
If nothing further, then those in favor? Okay, we have 7. Anybody opposed? Abstained? No. 7-0-0. Thank you very much for your time, and
Thanks for supporting me, as you.
No problem.
Thank you.
Okay. So next up for interdepartment transfers is electricity, and that's coming from Youth and Family Services, salary and wages. So let's do that too.
McMahon, I move to transfer $80,000 from Youth and Family Services, salary and wages, to electricity.
Clap second.
Thank you. Okay. Floor
So we mentioned that we typically do seek an interdepartmental transfer for electricity, but we had not expected, it's not typically this much. And when we talked about the interdepartmental transfer for water, we had said that we had not been forecasting this big of a deficit in our electricity budget. That being all said, one of the exercises that we have to do in the finance department is related to our 2 virtual net metering contracts. And so John can probably speak to that in much more detail. But essentially, all of our credits have to be applied and matched up, and then money is paid out under our contracts to the owners of the solar arrangements. And those were things that were approved at town meeting, I want to say in 2012, and they're 20-year agreements, so they're just in place. And so you've probably heard a lot about them when we talk about other potential solar projects, because we talk about the ceiling and just making sure that we're not, that our electricity use is sort of matching our credits. So anyway, so that is that was a very large, very complicated spreadsheet that our former town accountant did, and so it just took some time for us to get reconciled, and when we did, we found this. So we would likely be seeking an increase to the budget for next year. Just as a reminder, fiscal '24 is the first year of our new contract. We had anticipated a much more significant increase than we actually got, but this is sort of a result, I guess, of the 2 things: the unknown, or the application of this new contract, as well as just learning the net metering process. Yeah.
Yeah, it sums it up. Some of that was just timing and not knowing. As we got caught up with our net metering accounting, we have to, because our accounts get credited for those net meterings, we get 0 amount bills, but yet we have to pay out. So we have to adjust for the net amounts that we actually consume. So it was just catching up in that adjustment that then showed us this late of where our consumption was and our pricing, both of which are higher.
And you just said something about next budget? Does this mean for fall town meeting you'll be increasing it? Or
I
am
mean,
I,
we'll
are we
have-
talking about fiscal 26 or what?
So fiscal 25, so,
Five,
cur-
okay.
so the one we're about to start.
Yeah.
We'll need to look at that again because, we level funded, based on because the contract
yeah.
term is the same. That was a, I think, 2-year contract. So we might have to seek an increase in that budget.
At fall town.
Fall time meeting. Yeah.
Any questions? No? Okay, all those in favor? 7, no opposed, 700.
Thank you.
Okay. Don't go too far, because I think you're up next too, which is ARPA funds. And I did send everybody out a cut and paste from the website as of June 11th. And I sent it to everybody that at least this is where we were with ARPA as of June 11th. Essentially, it tells you all the programs where they're at as of at least the last time it was updated. So I'll let you go from there.
Yep.
So they have some background.
So you can see, I think on that sheet, you can probably see the balance remaining.
It's about 9,000, well, $9,471.41 from the original, I'm sorry, total, but I don't have a balance of if you subtract out the things we're not.
Right, so as of right now, that balance is really based, we've allocated more than the original amount received because as we always explain, the interest that's earned on the money that we're holding stays with the ARPA, so it gets allocated through the same exact process. There are 2 projects on that list for youth and family services, which we've talked about before. We had talked a little bit about potentially using that ARPA money for the contract with Shrewsbury Youth and Family Services if we had started that contract in the mid-fiscal year. But we didn't do that. So now our contract is lined up with the fiscal year, and so we didn't ask for ARPA funds for that. Right now, it's about $250,000 between the 2 projects. One of them is for a behavioral mental health support. That's not needed anymore as an ARPA project because it's something that we're able to support now with our contract through Shrewsbury Youth and Family Services. The other one was more of a programming. It was about $77,000 if I remember right, and that was a program that our former director had started to work with, I think, Westborough Connects on that program, but then because we didn't have anyone to manage that, we did not move forward. So we have talked to Shrewsbury Youth and Family Services as well as the chair of the Youth Commission about, and the outreach coordinator about sort of thinking through identification of potential ARPA projects with that money. But we don't anticipate all of that money now going to youth and family services. So at this point, what we are requesting is that both of the total amount of those 2 projects, and I'm sorry, I don't have the exact amount in front of me.
Well, one is $148,575 and one's $77,750. So
Yeah.
somewhere around $230,000.
Yeah. That those 2 projects, that money be released back to the available balance. And then it could be used for other projects inclusive of any projects that they would come forward with, understanding that we only have till the end of this year to obligate that money. An obligation of that money is not just the select board awarding it, but also it needs to be under contract. So we also anticipate maybe a few $1,000s from some other projects coming back, and we're still watching that dog park project. But for now, the first request is that money be sort of released and come back to the available balance. And then the second part of the request tonight is that $45,000 of it be allocated to
the work at the community center. So I can talk more, I'll just talk more about that now, and then you can ask me any questions. When we purchased the community center, we had two articles. So one was just the 8.8 million for the purchase of the community center. And then the second one was another, I think it was about $200,000 in free cash that was to serve in multiple purposes. So one was utilities and maintenance during the FY24 fiscal year. Another portion of that was some of the assessments that we were doing. So those have all been available online, so we use money for that. And then within that, we had estimated about $85,000 for an architect, which was based on our discussions with other architectural firms and what we were looking to do in terms of the feasibility, but then also schematic design. At the time, because we were still not sure. So the way the procurement law works is that once you go over 1.5 million, you're required to have an owner's project manager. Not knowing exactly what the program will be for the building, the process that we had anticipated at that time would have sort of done similar to kind of what you're hearing about with the golf course, where you would kind of create the program and then move forward. In talking, in subsequent conversations after town meeting, we expect to exceed the 1.5 million. I mean, it's nothing new that you haven't heard before. When you do a commercial kitchen and then just sort of all the building fit up, and really, it would make sense to bring on the OPM, the owner's project manager, at the beginning of the process rather than trying to pull them in the middle of that process. So, what we did was we put out a RFQ for an owner's project manager, which we awarded to CHA. And so we've gone through that process, and then now we've just put out an RFQ for the architect. And so we would request that equivalent of the owner's project manager contract be allocated from ARPA. So that's about $45,000. So we did vet this with the finance team, with comments feeling like this was work moving forward for the community center was a good use of ARPA funds. And Walter sits on that, so you can speak to it too.
Yes, and we talked about after this, you would be likely opening this back up to
Yes.
departments to
Yep.
put in requests, so that later this year, we try to collect those maybe all into more of a thing, so we can
Right.
make decisions on
Right.
what we think are the best ones or something.
So we have had a couple sort of one-off requests for this committee. So one, it was the Armstrong School roof. One was the $250,000 for the Otis Street project for matching funds. One was the $10,000 for the downtown plan. So things that have sort of come up. But then most recently, you were sort of given many options of things that were out there. And that's where decisions were made. For example, like for the fire department, there was an award made, but not to the level that was requested. So, with the available balance, we would go back out to the departments and ask them any other ideas that they have, or things that they want to bring forward or need to bring forward, and then that would come to you as a typical process after it goes through finance team.
Okay. Questions? Ron?
Could you just remind me of the dog park? So the 107 that's on the list now, is that for design or is that for construction? Or I know a good portion of it's coming from a grant.
It's for the whole project.
Okay.
So it's the town's match for the whole project.
Okay.
And I think, but what's expected to come back possibly is there's contingency in that.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
see.
And so it isn't, if things go well, you might not use it all up. Because, yeah, like you said, the Stanton Foundation's paying 90% or
Yeah,
something
they're
like
paying.
that. And so this covers the 10% that they're not doing and
The contingency.
other things that come up. And, yeah.
Do we
Yeah,
know
and
the
that's fully
timing?
approved now, so that'll move forward.
I think they're talking about this fall, right?
Yeah.
For construction. They were just at the
Planning board.
planning board recently talking about it. And I think that's,
Dogs didn't play much.
The dogs didn't seem to complain.
No, I don't know what else is on the future list, but the senior center, multi-purpose center seems like a good use of ARPA funds. If there's other things that, I know there's a bunch of things that are being looked at.
Just I know you said it, but I don't think I quite got it. Was it the architect or the OPM?
The OPM.
The OPM.
Mhm.
So the architect is not covered under this.
Correct. So
Okay.
if we were to use the ARPA funds to cover the OPM contract, we would still have $85,000 in the article for the architect, plus some additional money that potentially hasn't
Okay.
been used.
Yeah.
But we will open those bids for the architect, I think, tomorrow. So,
Got it.
So our motion here would be to approve the ARPA funding of $45,000 for an OPM for the
community center.
community center. Is
Yeah.
that the correct phrasing?
And that gets the OPM through what phase?
That's
or-
just the first phase, so that gets us to town meeting, so, doing all of the community engagement up to, through schematic design and cost estimation. So this, one of the things that we liked about this OPM is that they do their own in-house cost estimating, so they sort of have to reconcile with the architect who has a cost estimator as well, so we'll see what that number is in the fall.
And so the plan is to come to fall town meeting with a proposal for the
Yes.
build out in essence, or what do you want?
For the,
Call it?
right.
Whatever we want.
for the construction costs.
Okay. Any other questions? No further discussion? How about a motion, somebody?
McMahon, I move to approve the use of $45,000 in ARPA funds for the OPM on the community center.
Sorry, do you also just want to add, because we have to,
Yeah.
before this available, we have to release the
Oh.
money from Youth and Family Services.
We need to pull
Oh.
back
To the
those
available
two
balance, yep.
first and then
Do you want
reallocate
us to do
it.
that first?
Okay.
Or does it
I mean,
matter?
however,
It doesn't matter.
probably
the
need
order.
to do that
We
first,
probably need
or
to do
all
that
as
in that
one
order,
motion.
so
And I
there's
think
money
what we're
there.
doing is also just recommending that the select board does this, because I don't think we officially
That's right. That's
decide
how
this.
we've been doing it.
We,
but-
we recommend, we make a recommendation to select board, much like we do for the warrant articles.
Mhm.
Well, yeah, okay, let's try to.
All right, so McMahon, I move we recommend the select board rescind approval for $77,750 for youth and family services, behavioral health programming, and $148,575 for youth and family services case management from ARPA funding.
Clap second.
Okay. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, okay, all in favor? All right, that's 7-0-0, nobody opposed. All right, now let's try the other one.
Do you want me to
Just
do
write
that
it
again?
down.
Okay. McMahon, I move we recommend the select board approve $45,000 in ARPA funding for the OPM for the community center.
Bradley, second.
Okay, McMahon and Bradley, any further discussion, questions, comments? Okay, all in favor? You wanna get to the Celtic game? 7-0-0, that motion passes. Okay, so there's no form I have to sign or fill out, right? You can, or do I write a letter to the select board, or is there any official thing, or
I don't
they'll
think that
trust
we've
you?
done that. Yeah, I think we can just provide minutes, but yeah, everything.
Okay. That sounds good. All right, let's see if we can find the agenda again. Okay, next up is, no, it's not the agenda, sorry.
Oh, no.
I took your agenda to,
That's it? That's, oh, no, never mind.
Winter,
I was gonna say, I gave you mine. It's all black and white. There's no color printing on mine. Is it on your keyboard right there?
Yeah, probably. All right, very good, thank you. Okay, Andrew, you didn't have the opportunity to be at the last meeting. We talked a bit about the fiscal '26 budget. It's on the agenda tonight, just briefly. I don't know if you had a chance to watch our last meeting, but, the plan is mainly for Christie to look into making that our first meeting in September, hopefully with more meat on the bone, or however you want to call it, a discussion kind of thing and information at that time. But I didn't know if you wanted to bring up anything that wasn't brought up. Originally, that was one of your suggestions at
Sure.
the meeting before, so I wanted to give you that opportunity.
So one of the things in the years of experience I have here is that I've discovered we're not finding the $1 million savings at all. Like, great people in this group here and before us have never found that savings. So it seems to me that the only way to change the budget more holistically, from what we can do as a group, is to approach it not so late in the game, which is to say, you know, when everything's been recommended, we decide 4,500% or pond is the way to go, but to say that we, as a body, have a philosophy that we want to try and say that we need to rethink how we are going to support the budget. So what does that mean? That's really vague. So what that means is that the budget is ours to propose, although the town manager has a budget line as well. And we know that the way the budget's voted is always the highest thing first. But we, as a committee, could take a position as we go into budgeting to say something to the effect of, we have amazing people in this town who do an amazing job. And the only way that we're gonna get a lower budget, potentially, is not if we try and whack at the end when everything has been set, but if we set an ambitious effort early to look at the way we do the budgets. And here's what that might look like, for example, because this is just one person's idea being shared with the team and not meant to be sort of the driver, would look like something like, we as the finance committee are looking at a budget that will, for example, reduce all department budgets by 1%, except perhaps fire and police, which could be level service funded. And if we do it that way, when you look at what Ed Bain had suggested for the finance, that's all very interesting, but it's also entirely out of our scope because we don't tell the departments how to budget. But if we say what we were going for, then we have level funded for as long as I've been here, to the best of my knowledge, level service funded, to the best of my knowledge, and we would give departments a chance to say, honestly, what does 1% look like as a cut from our budget if we're not looking to target service, a level service? And with enough time, those individual departments would be able to produce potentially alternate budgets. Now, I will tell you that philosophically, something that's just allowed to grow endlessly without care, like any tree, needs to be pruned every once in a while. That's going to be a lot easier said for some groups than others, obviously. And there's other elements to this, like how we handle free cash and the bigger budget. But the idea would be that if we are to give the incredibly talented people who work the individual departments a fair chance to understand what this would look like for them, it would behoove us early and collectively to say, this is what we want to stand up and advocate for the town. If we have 5 different ideas, won't work, because we'll just have 5 different ideas to negotiate. 6, if you include the town managers as well, ideas to negotiate on the town floor. So the idea would be to ask if we, with time to think about it, could come up with a way that we could position what we think this should look like going forward. So that was the long conversation I had about how we could think about doing things a little bit differently, to have a meaningful impact. And to be clear, a 1% cut with everything else going up is a cut, is material cut, I think. So I'm not looking at going hog wild or anything like that. But I also think after years of level service funding, that there's an opportunity to say, for all but the safety departments, which is why, like, there's room to say maybe DPW is part of this. I totally get that. That's a conversation we need to have as a group. But it's a chance to say, what could the remarkable people who run our departments do if they were faced with a 1% cut? And what does that mean?
Okay. What about things like insurance?
Insurance, electricity, absolutely. I don't know what those things look like. So you can't cut things like
Yeah, they're
that
not
don't have room to
real
cut.
departments, I guess, so to speak.
No, you're 100% right. And maybe those need to be, I guess, whatever the equivalent of level of service funded is for electricity and insurance. I didn't think of them because they're kind of a fait accompli when they're brought to us, and we can't like shut down buildings or you know.
And debt.
Well,
I mean, these are big numbers.
there's definitely lines there that this wouldn't work in, but also you'll notice I didn't exclude the school as well. This is something that we wouldn't have control over, but again, something that we would allow the people that work in this town to build toward meaningfully. The other risk is if people think we will back off so quickly, if you're just thinking, and selfishly, I don't mean that like meanly, but like if you're just thinking about what you're doing for your department, you're going to suggest, oh, I will have to cut these very important things, and we will say, oh, no, we can't have that. But if we're dead serious about talking about a 1% cut, you will not see the important things come to the fore as an obstacle. You will see conscious, thoughtful effort put into what we might change, so that we maybe 0.5% is the right thing for a group if the quick case can be made. But we have to be serious about standing behind it, is the point.
There may not even be a case for a cut, but
There may not be.
because even coming in at 2% more or 3% more would be a lot different than the last few years. But
Yes, yeah, again, this was just the
finding the
thought.
number is hard.
That 1% just seems like genuinely painless enough, but
Well, it's
that
not-
1% against what would be a gain behind it is material. I realize that.
Right. I mean, I think with COLA and
Yep.
already negotiate contracts, the schools
Yes.
salary is up by 6-7%, 6%
Yes.
probably next year already. So you're talking about the 1% cut would be a 7% cut. A change.
Yes, for some groups and
Which
not
is
others.
a lot. It's like 1 in 15.
I agree, and that's why the 1% isn't, again, this isn't a dictation, this is a way we could look at
That's
it.
a lot of people.
But honestly, I would rather suggest a 1% cut and discover why it should be a 1% increase, rather than suggest a 3% increase and just sort of go with that. Like, we have continued to have grown unabated, like for the time that I was here. Well, there's shuffling around, so there's always little tiny things that happen. But I think the idea would be that we would take a serious position and have to get behind it as a group. Otherwise, we're back in the position where it'll be too late to make changes, and we're never going to find the $1 million because it's just not there. It's just not. So that was the idea I wanted to share. Not to suggest I had all the answers for all the departments. You're right, electricity, stuff like that. But to say that we as a group could think about what that moment would look like and what would we get behind for 9 people.
Either you, Christy or John, want to comment, or you just want to? You don't have to.
I'm sorry for the delay on the Celtics on that one. That was bigger.
That's okay.
I mean, I guess I would just want to sort of correct the record that we're not sort of growing unabated. We do look very carefully, and I think that we've tried to be more and more transparent in recent years, just about like what's new and different. I mean, what you said about a 1% cut is absolutely true, that it would be more than 1%. I guess I think that, what I said before at the last meeting when you weren't here was that I think I understand that the process feels like there's nothing that this committee can do or that town meeting can do sort of by the time you get it. So I understand that, and that's why I think that we need to have these conversations now and then prepare better at a September budget summit when we're sort of kicking it off. But we all have to commit to it. So select board, finance committee, school committee, whatever we decide. I do think that sort of wrapping around a goal as a percentage increase is more likely something that could maintain levels of service than just cutting across the board for the purpose of trying to find $1 million. So that would be my suggestion. I brought up last time that the select board back in 2016 did set a goal of 2% increase. Obviously, in recent years with inflation, in addition to how much our community has grown and the services that we provide, it just is not something that we've been able to meet. But we've talked about that at summits before, so maybe that's what I would encourage the conversation to be. Like, what's a realistic goal, and as opposed to just sort of cutting for cutting. But we did talk about at the last meeting, sort of giving a little more information so that, if you know how much, this type of employee costs, like, because it is going to be personnel. When you're talking about those bigger numbers, it's going to be personnel.
But thank you, and I appreciate the candid feedback. And I think that this body has never had, nor should it ever have, the hands-on determination of like the details of what we should be doing. And I think that's what my 6 years has come to, is like, I realize that our lever is that dollar amount, not how it's executed. And throughout it all, like almost without exception with the different people, these are really, really good people who work very hard at what they're doing and they're very competent. And it just seems unfair that we at any level would be surgically involved in deciding what should or shouldn't happen. Like the DPW, they have such a vast array of things to go. They would be able to tell what a cut looks like. But the notion of level of service, I think, is the first dog to die in this fight, because we have to think about how can we continue to do the important things and maybe think about other things we don't have to, if it means we don't spend so much. So
I guess I would also just say that we're talking about level service as if that's been the main driver of these increases, and it hasn't. In recent years, we've shown it's level service plus. It's level service plus these positions. It's level service plus these services. So that, I think that's where the conversation is. Like, how much plus are we sort of comfortable with? And I mean, I would say that we have added a staff on the town side in recent years, which we hadn't for a long time. But I think that we're stabilizing now in terms of kind of keeping pace with our population increase. So I think we're on the same page in terms of moving forward and definitely understanding the impacts of what we've seen in recent years and how FY26 might look different. But I open to the discussion. We talked about to the select board too. I don't know if you mentioned that, Walter. Just kind of, I briefed them on this exact conversation that we had. So I think that we can sort of better use that September meeting, which is really the kickoff that informs, I think, a lot of the budget process.
is that not too late? Like, are things already being baked by then? And I honestly, I don't know what's
No.
happening behind the scenes.
No,
Okay.
no, it's a good question. So we have the September meeting where we sort of generally talk about what the budget pressures are, and so sometimes those are tough to know. So capital is already sort of being formed, capital requests, but budget requests we don't get until October. So it's kind of the right
Okay.
time. So.
Thank you.
Do you roll forward the level service, including like steps and COLAs and new debt coming on? Like, if we did nothing else, do you know how much of an increase next year's budget would be now?
Yeah, I mean, we could do that with salary. I mean,
I just feel like, we're throwing out these numbers like,
yeah,
I mean, a 1% cut would be a huge cut.
right.
Huge
Right.
cut. I mean, we're
That
gonna
was
see.
just a number, people.
Understood, but we can't talk about targets until we know, like, okay, well, we don't have new positions coming on, but we do. We have a bunch of half positions coming on, because we only funded half of them this year. So it's like, you know, there's all the steps, there's all the cost of living, there's all the extra half-year positions that are gonna come on this year, there's all the new debt. It's like, we're already talking about a pretty big increase before we had anything. So, you know, before we set a target, if that's what we wanna do, it would be good to know what that number looks like.
Yeah, the only.
Because I think 2% is crazy. Like,
I mean,
Yeah.
I think that that's a great point too in the setting a baseline, right? So I get Andrew's point in the sort of pushing back and could we raise less, right? Could we decrease the budget? And so if we say, well, this is 0, this is nothing changes, we do the contractually obligated changes next year, that's 0. And then we look at where do our budget proposals vary from this baseline, right? And that, I think that's an interesting conversation. What is that percentage increase just doing the things we're already contractually obligated to do?
Yeah, the only challenge is that for this particular fiscal year, we have, all of our contracts are open. So we can roll forward like
Right.
current increases, but we don't know where we'll settle.
right,
That's the only
Like
challenge.
the school contract's good for one more year.
right.
The
past
school ones,
this year,
yeah, I don't know
but the
exactly,
town
but the town ones are all
due for the-
open.
Yeah.
But you could at least roll it forward using the same assumptions we used last year to get a rough estimate, but you're right, like
I mean,
we
get an
aren't gonna
estimate,
get
but
the
that's-
numbers, but
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, it's not, and then the other driver obviously is the like contractual services in our expense lines, but I understand what you're saying. We
Right.
could certainly show that, based on, like, if we used this year's COLA, just to
Yeah,
give you an
yeah, because I
idea.
think it would be helpful for people, because I hear a lot of people talking about, you know, what would be a reasonable increase, and it's like, well, we've already voted for a pretty big increase for next year
Right.
before we do anything. I mean,
Yeah, I know that, I mean, it's,
I know, it's
it's
all-
2 positions, so I don't think it's quite as many.
no, but with the
Yeah.
COLAs and the steps
Sure.
and, you
Yeah.
know, debt, and, I mean, it's gonna increase
Mhm.
unless we make cuts, so.
But I mean, I just like the idea of it sets reasonable expectations. So if we say if we just roll everybody forward with the normal steps in COLA based on this year's, right? So normal experience we expect, if we roll all that forward and we're already at a 4% increase, then that really adjusts our expectations in terms of what is a reasonable cut. If we know just rolling forward the salaries and the debt service changes we already agreed to, and I just made up 4%, same as Andrew just made up 1, so that is my entirely, but we can frame the conversation from there, because right now, Andrew's just making up a number for this
Right.
theoretical conversation, and we don't have any real data
Yeah, right.
without understanding that.
Yeah, and I think that's, if you're gonna talk to the other boards about setting a goal, like, that's the type of data that we would need to provide to you. I guess I would also say that, we're sort of talking about 2 different increases that we just need to be mindful of, is you're talking about the budget increase, but then we're also talking about the tax increase. And because, the tax increase is obviously also impacted by state aid and revenues and all those things, the sort of easier one to have the conversation about is the budget increase, because then that moves forward. I know that there's been some conversation about kind of setting what the right tax increase is, but as you all know, the state still hasn't set their budget for this fiscal year that's starting in 2 weeks. So you can't, chasing that number, I don't think is reasonable. So it's that goal, in fact, in 2016, and I think the discussion is the budget increase.
Yeah, and that's what I was talking
Yeah,
about, is the
yeah.
budget increase, not the tax
Sure.
increase, because
There's
That's
so many
completely out of our
variables
control.
there,
Yeah.
yeah.
so maybe John's a little.
Not completely out of
John
our
is
control.
trying to go somewhere.
Some
Exception-
percentage out of our
I'll take
control.
exception to that one.
Right.
Okay. Thank you very much.
By the way, thank you for the platform. Like, that's,
Oh, you're welcome.
it's a big bite
We
to
missed
take.
you last week.
Thank you.
Whatever it was, 2 weeks ago.
Apologies.
Particularly because that was like one of the items you had requested to. All right, next up, are there liaison reports? I'm gonna look at Rod because I know you guys over in the municipal building have been
Yeah, so,
doing some work.
We interviewed the three consulting candidates, and the last Thursday selected Bechtel Frank Erickson out of Lexington, who I thought had a good proposal and a very good presentation. And as I said last time, I thought all three candidates was very happy with what we received, and they all had similar budgets, and they all agreed that if the municipal building committee would put in the work, that they could have us ready for fall town meeting. So we're set a schedule to meet every 2 weeks, and I think we have a pretty good game plan to get there.
Nice.
And this is golf course specifically, or?
The golf club, yeah.
Okay, golf club, excuse me, golf club, yeah.
Okay, very good. Anybody else? I think you visited DPW?
Yes, so I had a chance to meet Chris as well as Maria. It was last week actually, end of last week. So, yep, I mean, it was a good understanding of exactly what they are sending every week in terms of the snow and ice report. And what I figured out was basically, I think some of you may already know it, or a lot of you may already know it, but it was essentially, my questions were around, the season is already over, so how come we are getting those expenses and wages? So wages obviously don't change because it's off season now, but then in terms of expenses, a lot of those repairs in terms of post plowing start at this time. So that's why we see those expenses happening now. Having said that, there were a few things which I had questions, and the answers were like, for example, how do I tie up the expenses that are produced every week with the account codes which are mentioned in the budget itself? Like if I need to see what is budgeted versus what is expended so far, I think they have it, but it's not coming out in the report itself. So it becomes a little difficult to tie up what are the account codes which are hitting for each of those line items that are coming in the expenses. And the other point was also about, the vehicles. So it wasn't very clear to me as such yet in terms of which part of the vehicles maintenance is coming out of the snow and ice versus the regular EWD maintenance budget. So obviously those were some of the gray areas, but I think overall it answered my questions in terms of understanding the report now, what it is coming. So if anyone has, I mean, I can forward you, and if you have any questions on those reports, I'll be happy to answer in terms of the, that's pretty much what it was.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, this time of year, they usually buy some more salt.
Salt
too.
as well, yep, you're right.
But I think, Rod's, my general impression was almost any repair to a truck that is that is used for plowing or sanding tends to get expensed to this, because I think plowing, first of all, puts a lot of wear and tear on these things, but also it's an available budget, so it doesn't help the town, particularly if they took it from this bucket versus that bucket, and we certainly want them to change the springs when they break or whatever, but
Yep.
It isn't just now. I mean, the use of some of those repairs start in the fall, long before the snow flies, because they're getting things ready.
Right.
So I guess you'll see that next year. But I mean, our main reason that we want to monitor snow and ice is generally because of the reserve fund transfer at the end of the year, to know, if we had 5 big storms, the budget isn't going to cover it. And then we've typically in the past taken money from the AFC reserve to cover it. And this way, it's not a big surprise that all of a sudden, March, someone comes up and says we need money, because someone's at least paying attention. I think the nuances of the smaller repair stuff is somewhat interesting, but not, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it's small money, and at least being spent on keeping equipment going, so, I wouldn't worry too much about that.
But snow and ice doesn't have to be funded from the reserve, right? It
Well,
could be
you-
any intra-departmental
It could,
transfer,
correct.
right? It just,
if you
Is that
happen to
right?
have,
That's interesting
That's
if
true.
you're tucking all of your repairs into vehicles, and if you're tucking it into a budget line that can be spent technically extensively. Like, I don't believe that's like the shell game that's being played,
No.
But it's a bit of a loophole, potentially. Police chief's electrical vehicle, snow use, get it fixed there. Boom.
Put a sander on the
I
back
don't think
and
they're
I'm all
doing
for
that.
it.
I think these are more like the 1-ton trucks and the.
No, of course it's what it
the
is.
VW vehicles, they're not.
I'm just saying that there's a hole there, potentially. Anyhow,
So there's always holes if you expect people, or if you don't trust their integrity, but I do.
well, no,
so-
no, not that at all.
For the wrong thing, and then you need it, that's the problem. That's why
Right.
we don't use it for the wrong thing.
Right, right. Exactly.
That's not the only thing.
Okay, anybody else have,
Yeah, there was a conversation that a number of the folks on AFC have experience, like with the data management and analytics and stuff. We're still not going to find $1 million, I'm sure, but there was a suggestion we might be able to ask once things settle down at the finance, ask about a block of history for details that can be shared electronically, not just copied out of the books, like a simple line of what is the budget for that year for that budget line, what is the actual spend, and
well, we get the appropriation report. The ask was instead of a PDF, have it in Excel. That's already.
yeah, but I
that
mean
report.
like historical, like go back a ways.
Okay, well,
So-
I think then someone should be very specific about what they want, because I'm not gonna ask John for the last 5 years worth of everything.
I was
Unless
again
they-
10, obviously, so apparently I'm coming at this wrong way. But
Well, I mean,
I suppose the opening question here is what would it take to make it happen as easily as possible? Because
What-
it's a new group of people and we don't want to be a
no,
burden.
what's the justification for doing that?
So we can look more forensically at the data over time. Looking at it at any given year is not helpful. I have a spreadsheet where I've taken down 200 lines of budget lines manually, and they change all the time, and I can't do that. I have it back like 5 or 6 years. But you know what? It's crap because every year it ages. So if I could get this presented digitally, we could do what the trending is for groups and areas and budget lines and stuff.
So Andrew, is
Why?
your
Because-
request sort of the tables we get through the budget process, right, where it has the prior year's budget and
Yep,
actual
that's-
for,
In my
Some
mind,
number of
and
years,
mind you,
yeah.
again, the question needs to be formulated because it shouldn't be wasteful. It should be
Right.
respectful of time, and it should be something that serves the people who are weenies, like the data weenies, like us.
Right.
Like let's think about.
right, I want to look
and
at
that's where I
percentage
would
change
say,
over time, or.
What is the need?
Your data weaning has to be within the usefulness of what the AFC is supposed to do.
Sure.
I mean, it isn't to
Look at
10 years
budgets.
and just look at numbers without the context of why certain things change, because you won't have that history in those numbers. You just have
Michelangelo
numbers.
wasn't just given rocks; it's what he did with the rocks. You know, like this is we're just asking for some rocks. But no, I understand the ask, and I don't mean to be flip
You
about
can
it.
rabbit
but-
hole a ton, and I'm just not, I would like to be shown the value in, I think it ought to be contained into something much smaller than asking something that large.
Okay.
10 years of data of everything, of every budget. I mean, it's all available on the website if you want to rabbit
Yeah,
hole
if
it,
you want
but
to, if you want to fat finger it, like I guess the difference here is like it wouldn't be always 10 years. Once we're caught up, then it's easy to add to it. It just needs to be. I will tell you that what I have from
But
2 years ago.
What do you do with that? I don't
Again,
get it.
it's-
I mean, how do you account for
So-
inflation or number of police officers
So,
or
and the
how many emergencies you have?
I mean,
the
I think
answer
that
is-
information though is what you would use to contrast against inflation and population growth, right? And without some consistent level setting of that data, I can't look at population growth.
But then what do you do
And
with
do it-
that?
Are you just
say,
asking for the
"We
budget
did a
table,
great-"
those lines in the budget
Yes.
table?
Yes, kind of. So the
That's
reason
not
I
a
knew
huge
that the
ask.
police chief and the fire chief had pay raises way above anybody else is because I looked at the history over time and I could compare and I could see this year way out of proportion. And there were good reasons for it. I take nothing away. We voted, we love it, whatever. But the reason I knew about that is because I could see the data. The reason I knew the landfill budget has been undervalued, or we've been over budgeting for it, is because I had 3 or 4 years of data. Did I know I was looking for landfill? No, but it was a place to start the question. And so what can we do with it? Obviously, each data person is going to have a different strategy as to what they want to bring to it. And there's other nuances and details here as well, because budget lines come and go. They get reallocated. And so there's work to be done by the people who want to look at this in a way that makes sense, like even historically, because you'll see entire budget lines disappear. So if there's a way to ask for it and present it, and honestly, an output that says from 2022 versus from 2012, it's a typo. It's one digit. Export. There's your Ditto file. So I don't know why 10 years is so much more of a lift than 5 years, and maybe there is a reason. I don't know.
It's an appendix in the budget book.
A digital appendix.
No, but but it is literally a spreadsheet that goes back to fiscal 13. It's an appendix in the budget. It's the 5-year financial forecast.
Is there a way to get that digitally? Because that's
Yeah,
the
we
gap.
can, we can get that digitally, but I
Okay.
guess what I'm saying is you get it every year, so I just don't want you to think you don't.
Yep.
So,
It's the digital, this entire conversation is about digital. So that's lovely to hear that we apparently can get 10 years easily. So
I'm more
I-
worried about what you're gonna do with it and how much I'm gonna have to listen to than I am actually about you getting your data.
That's pretty
Because
high, it's pretty
honestly-
high level. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not.
I-
There's no detail in it. That's pretty high level. That seems pretty summary to me.
Which
I
is,
think it's
I guess I'm not,
totally
I
reasonable.
can't picture what we get
And
for
it's
10
in the
years.
book. I mean, it's, yeah. No, doesn't,
So-
we've
so I-
already talked about this too much, I think.
Okay.
What time's Tip?
Is it just the forecast that you were talking about? The 5-year financial forecast that goes back FY 13 and forward looking to 20?
and it shows, it gives the average year over year
and then
the 5-year average.
Yep.
So we update that every year.
Okay, I don't know that it had anything to do with liaison reporting, but,
You said anything else?
no,
I was
I said
jumping in
any
there.
other liaison
Ah,
reports,
damn
and
it.
I thought you were talking about something.
I wanted to ask.
I'll accept that as a future draft agenda discussion, I guess. All right, I sent out a calendar of potential meetings for the run-up to the October special town meeting. And my hope is some of those meetings, especially in early September, will be not needed. Because right now, there's way more meetings than, say, we did last year, but you never know. And those are basically the Mondays and Thursdays between September and October. So that way, at least we have this room for most of them. In the interest of time, I'm not gonna bring up the schedule and go through it or anything. Okay, approval of minutes for June 3rd.
Shafford, so moved.
Shafford moves to approve them. Are there any?
Bradley, second.
Bradley, second. Are there any corrections, discussion? Other? If not, then all in favor?
I'm gonna abstain.
6, you opposed or
So
abstained?
well, I can still do it, but I haven't looked at the video and I hadn't read up on it, so at the moment I will abstain.
Okay.
So probably a good choice.
6:01. Approved.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much. Anything else?
John came and went. I didn't know if he was.
Oh,
gonna say
he's been here and,
No, but like his picture was there, his face was there.
oh, he forgot to turn off his camera when he rejoined. Anything else?
No, it's that my phone hung up and I had to redial in because I can't get it to work on my laptop.
I thought it was a segue.
I think there was
Um,
there was one follow-up in the last meeting. I think I'm looking at June 3rd. Oh, sorry, thanks. About the electricity cost, is there gonna be any impact on other budget lines for the 43% increase, which was unanticipated for, I forget the department.
It was
yeah.
water.
Water,
So
yeah.
tonight you approved the electricity budget,
Right.
interdepartmental transfer. That covers the other departments.
Perfect.
We haven't, I don't, the only other ones I guess would be sewer, but I haven't heard anything from the director on that.
Sounds good. Thank you.
True. Okay, our next meeting is July 8th, Monday. That will be the last meeting for transfers barring any emergency. They have to be done by July 15th. And then we will have Sustainable Westborough, Pete Dunbeck here talking about his model, which I'll get to you guys before he comes. And whatever else we have at that time. And then there's another meeting July 22nd if needed. That one may not, given that we can't do transfers at that point. I think it's too early, probably too much else. Okay, how about a motion to adjourn?
Shafford, motion to adjourn.
Nobody's gonna
Bradley,
second.
All the talking.
All in favor? 7:00, we are adjourned, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank Christie and Westborough TV. Good night, John.
Gotta watch the Celtics game.
I think